He was reviled by gods and mortals, branded a kinslayer, an archetypal villain who murdered and dismembered his own brother. Yet he was still revered for his terrifying power, held an indispensable role in the cosmos, and ultimately stood as the eternal guardian on the prow of the sun god's barge, the celebrated protector of divine order. His name was Seth. How could the very embodiment of chaos also be the universe's most necessary defender? That paradox is the entire story, because at the very heart of the Egyptian serene worldview there was a primal scream. Woven into the very fabric of their divine order was a force that existed only to tear it all down, a force that represented everything they feared: the unnatural, the unpredictable, the violent, and the terrifyingly other. Today we are not walking in the serene temples of Isis or basking in the golden light of Ra. We're venturing into the tempest, into the howling red desert, to explore a god who gets perhaps the most complicated and darkest rap in all of mythology. Forget the straightforward heroes and the benevolent protectors for a moment, because today we're talking about the ultimate disruptor, the original agent of chaos, the one and only Seth. Before your mind conjures up images of some horned, cloven-hoofed devil twirling a pitchfork, we need to clear the air, and this is probably the most important point of our entire journey. The ancient Egyptians did not really have a concept of evil in the way we might in a post-Abrahamic world. They didn't see the universe as a simple binary war between absolute good and absolute evil. Theirs was a far more nuanced and, frankly, a more realistic worldview. It was a constant, dynamic struggle between Mayat, that divine established order, and its opposite, Isfet. Isfet wasn't evil. It was disorder. It was chaos, violence, injustice, and untruth. It was the lie that disrupts society, the storm that flattens the crops, the eclipse that snuffs out the sun, the foreigner who invades the sacred black land. Isfet wasn't a rival creation. It was the absence of order, the primordial state of the universe before the gods shaped it. And here's the crucial part. The Egyptians believed that Isfet was a constant, lingering threat, always waiting at the margins, always trying to reclaim the world, to pull creation back into an undifferentiated soup. And one god, above all others, was the living, breathing, raging embodiment of Isfet. That god was Seth. To understand Seth, you have to understand his family, the great Ennead of Heliopolis. At the beginning there was the sky goddess Nut, arched over her brother the earth god Geb. They were locked in a passionate embrace, but their father, Shu, the god of air, forced them apart, creating the space for life to exist. Nut then gave birth to 5 children, each representing a crucial piece of the new world. First came Osiris, the god of fertility, kingship, and civilization. Then came Horus the elder. Then came Isis, the goddess of magic, motherhood, and wisdom. And then came Nephthys, a goddess of the night, of mourning, and of hidden places. And then there was Seth. According to some of the earliest religious texts, the pyramid texts, Seth's very birth was an act of violence. While his siblings were born in the natural, orderly way, Seth tore himself from his mother's womb, ripping through her side in a bloody, unnatural birth that immediately defined him as a being who defies Mayat. From the very first second of his existence, he was a rebel. He was the exception to the rule. His divine portfolio was a laundry list of everything an ancient Egyptian, living precariously in a fertile valley, would have feared. He was the god of the Deshret, the Red Land, the vast, scorching, sterile desert that surrounded their home. While Osiris ruled the Black Land, the life-giving mud of the Nile, Seth was given the useless part of the world. He was the god of violent storms, not the gentle, life-giving rain, but the terrifying hay-boobs, the sandstorms that would sweep in from the desert, blinding everything, burying villages and turning the sky a terrifying blood red. He was the god of unbridled, red-blooded violence, of brute strength, and of confusion. He was also, and this is critical, the god of foreign lands. To the Egyptians, who were deeply xenophobic, anything and anyone outside the sacred borders of the Nile Valley was by definition chaotic and inferior. Seth was their patron. He was the ultimate other, the outsider. His very appearance was designed to be unsettling, to embody this otherness. While gods like Horus had the noble head of a falcon and Anubis the familiar head of a jackal, Seth was given a form that scholars to this day cannot definitively identify. This is the Seth animal. Picture it, a lean, powerful, canine-like body, but with a long, drooping, often curved snout. Some have argued it's an aardvark, but the body is wrong. Others say it's a type of pig, or a saluki, or a donkey, or even a giraffe. But no single animal matches the depiction. He has tall, squared-off ears that look like they've been clipped, and a long, stiff tail that is unnervingly forked at the end. This ambiguity is the entire point. The Seth animal is a composite, a hybrid, a creature that should not exist in the natural, ordered world. It blends familiar animals into something alien and unnatural, perfectly symbolizing his role as a force that defies categorization and shatters norms. He is a walking, breathing paradox, the embodiment of the unpredictable. When he wasn't in this animal form, he was often depicted as a man with the Seth animal head, or sometimes even as a hippopotamus, another creature the Egyptians saw as chaotic, powerful, and terrifyingly destructive, known for emerging from the murky depths to destroy boats and trample crops. So we have this god. He is born of violence. He rules the terrifying desert. He commands the storms. He champions the foreign enemies of Egypt. He looks like a creature from a nightmare. It's a pretty open and shut case for villain, right? Well, this is where ancient Egyptian philosophy gets so incredibly deep, and it brings us to the core motif of our story today. Without chaos, order cannot exist. Seth, in all his tumultuous, raging glory, was not merely an antagonist to be vanquished. He was an essential force. He was a necessary part of the cosmic engine. The Egyptians, with their profound understanding of duality, knew that harmony could only be truly appreciated, truly defined, if it had something to push against. Order, Ma'at, was not a static state of being. It was a constant, active maintenance. It was a daily effort to keep Isfet at bay. And Seth was that Isfet. Think of it this way. A muscle cannot grow stronger unless it is stressed, unless it meets resistance. A riverbank is only defined by the water that pushes against it. A society's laws and sense of justice only become stronger when they are challenged by crime and injustice. Seth was that challenge. He was the cosmic resistance, the divine stress test that forced order to constantly reassert itself, to prove itself, to become more resilient. He was the thunder that, while terrifying, cleared the stagnant air. He was the fire that, while destructive, forged new, stronger metal. This concept wasn't just an abstract philosophy. It was built into their daily reality. The sterile desert, Seth's kingdom, was a place of death, but it was also a natural barrier that protected the Nile Valley from invasion. It was a place of chaos, but it was also the source of precious minerals like gold and carnelian, which were essential to the ordered civilization of the pharaohs. Seth's storms were destructive, but they were also a display of raw divine power, a reminder of nature's untamable strength. In fact, in some of his earliest roles, Seth was not a villain at all, but a fierce, if unpredictable, protector. He was revered for his brute strength, his sekhem. In the pyramid texts, the pharaoh's power is often compared to the strength of Seth. The pharaoh was said to have the fury of Seth in battle. He was a war god, the one you wanted on your side when you were facing the chaotic hordes from outside Egypt's borders. He was, in a strange way, the chaotic force you used to fight other chaos. This brings us to his most famous heroic role, one that perfectly encapsulates his tragic duality. Every single night, the sun god Ra, the ultimate symbol of Ma'at, would sail his solar barge through the Duat, the perilous underworld, to be reborn at dawn. And every night, a monstrous serpent named Apep, the ultimate embodiment of primordial world-ending chaos, would try to attack the barge and swallow the sun, plunging the world into eternal darkness. The most powerful gods, including Isis and even Osiris, traveled on this boat for protection. But who was the one god strong enough, violent enough, and chaotic enough to stand at the prow and physically battle this monster? Who was the one who would spear Apep night after night, ensuring that the sun would always rise? It was Seth. Think about the profound tragedy of that. Seth, the god of Isfet, was the only one capable of protecting Ma'at from a greater, more absolute form of Isfet. He was the necessary chaos, the good chaos that held the bad chaos at bay. He was vilified by the world for his very nature, yet that same nature was the only thing standing between creation and total oblivion. This is the character we are dealing with. He is not a simple monster, he is a paradox. He is a protector and a destroyer. He is a loyal guardian and a future betrayer. He is a god of strength and a god of jealousy. He is the guardian of the sun and the lord of the eclipsing darkness. So the stage is set. We have a universe founded on a delicate balance. We have the forces of order, represented by the fertile Nile, the law-giving pharaohs, and the benevolent god-king Osiris. And we have the forces of chaos, represented by the Red Land, the raging storm, and the outsider god, Seth. For a time, these two forces exist in a state of tense equilibrium, two brothers ruling two different, opposing halves of the same world. But what happens when that balance is upset? What happens when the god of chaos, the embodiment of the marginalized other, is forced to live in a world increasingly dominated by the perfect, placid order of his brother? What happens when the cosmic necessary force of Isfet boils over into a very personal, very human, and very bloody story of jealousy, resentment, and murder? This, my friends, is where the story truly begins. It's not just a battle between good and evil. It's a journey into the ancient Egyptian soul, a cosmic family drama where chaos wasn't just endured, but was, in its own way, revered, right up until the moment it went too far. All right, so we've got our cast. We've got the god of chaos, the ultimate outsider, the walking, talking paradox who is both a protector and a disruptor. We've established our central challenging theme, that you simply cannot have true order without chaos. But this is all still high-level cosmic philosophy. To understand what really makes Seth tick, to get to the heart of his tragedy, we need to make it personal. We have to go back to the beginning, to the divine family dinner table, because this grand cosmic struggle that would define a civilization, it all started, as these things so often do, as a bitter family feud. Now let's rewind. Let's go back to that golden dawn of the gods, to a time when Egypt itself was still a divine experiment, when the rhythm of the cosmos was just being established. As we said, Seth wasn't born a villain. He was a fundamental part of the divine family, one of the 5 original children of earth and sky. But from the very beginning, from the moment he tore himself from his mother's womb, there was a palpable tension. To understand that tension, we first have to understand his brother, Osiris. Osiris was, to put it simply, the golden boy. He was the firstborn, the heir, the very picture of Ma'at made manifest. When their father Geb, the earth god, decided to step back from ruling the mortal plane, he passed the throne of Egypt not to the strong, fierce Seth, but to the serene, benevolent Osiris. And Osiris, well, he was a natural. This was the mythical golden age of Egypt. Before Osiris, humanity was said to be a primitive, savage, and cannibalistic rabble. It was Osiris who, with his gentle, persuasive wisdom, civilized them. He was the one who taught humanity how to look at the land not as a wild place, but as a garden. He introduced them to agriculture, giving them the divine gift of Neper, the grain. He taught them how to cultivate wheat and barley. And, perhaps most beloved of all, he taught them how to brew beer, the staple drink of every Egyptian, from the pharaoh down to the pyramid builder. He gave them laws, he taught them how to worship the gods, and he established the very concept of divine kingship. His sister wife, the brilliant and powerful Isis, ruled alongside him. She was the goddess of magic, wisdom, and protection, the perfect complement to his benevolent rule. Together, they were the ultimate power couple, and under their combined reign, Egypt flourished. The Nile flooded regularly, the crops were bountiful, the people were happy, and the land was a verdant paradise. Osiris was, in effect, the perfect pharaoh. He was the Black Land, Kemet, the fertile, orderly, civilized heart of the world. He was everything stable, everything life-giving, everything good. And then there was Seth. While Osiris inherited the Black Land, Seth was given domain over the Deshret, the Red Land, the desert. Think about what that means. While Osiris ruled over millions of adoring subjects, bountiful harvests, and a thriving civilization, Seth was the king of what exactly? He was the king of sand, the king of scorpions, of vipers, of lizards, and of the howling empty wind. He was the lord of the vast, sterile, terrifying nothingness that defined Egypt's borders. And as we mentioned, he was the god of the vile foreigners, the Libyans to the west, the Nubians to the south, the Asiatics to the east. From the deeply xenophobic perspective of the Egyptians, these were not peoples to be respected. They were forces of Isfet, chaos to be subdued. Seth was their patron. Can you imagine the cosmic sibling rivalry? It's not just that your brother got the better Christmas present. Your brother inherited the entire family fortune, the thriving business, the city, the adoration of everyone, and you were given the barren patch of dirt behind the factory. In some myths, this division was even more explicit. The god Geb was said to have originally divided Egypt in two, just as the land itself is geographically divided. He gave Osiris the rule of Lower Egypt, the wide, incredibly fertile Nile Delta that fans out into the Mediterranean. And he gave Seth the rule of Upper Egypt, the long, narrow valley in the south, a region defined by the harsh cliffs and the encroaching desert. This was Seth's heartland. And while Upper Egypt was indeed a core part of the nation, the real wealth, the real population, the real life of Egypt was concentrated in Osiris's delta. From the very start, the scales were tipped. This is the very embodiment of that motif we discussed. Seth as the outsider. He is geographically, politically, and all too personal level marginalized. He is the god of the fringes, the borders, the other places. His entire existence is a study in contrast to his brother. Osiris brings life. Seth is the lord of the sterile. Osiris builds society. Seth is the spirit of the untamed wild. Osiris is beloved. Seth is feared. It's easy to see how a god whose entire identity is tied to the desolate, the untamed, and the destructive would feel a growing, gnawing sense of envy. He wasn't just jealous. He was, on an existential level, devalued. The entire world, as civilized by Osiris, seemed to be a celebration of everything Seth was not. And he watched, from his red-sanded kingdom, as Osiris's rule became synonymous with Maat itself, that perfect, placid, complacent order, an order that, from Seth's perspective, had no room for him. He was the grit in the oyster, the scream in the concert hall, and he was beginning to feel the urge to remind the world that he, too, was a son of earth and sky. But here, and this is where Seth's story becomes a true tragedy, is the paradox. He wasn't just about causing trouble. As we touched on, Seth also had a profound and absolutely vital protective aspect. He was the fierce guardian, the one who fought against Egypt's external enemies. This is the tragedy of Seth. He is the misunderstood balancer. He was vilified on earth for the very disruptions, the storms, the violence, the rage, that, in a cosmic sense, were the only things keeping the true darkness at bay. His role was not to be loved, it was to be necessary. And this wasn't just a mythological role, it was a political one. Throughout Egyptian history, but especially in the New Kingdom, the pharaohs were often great warriors. And when the pharaoh went into battle, who did he channel? Not the gentle Osiris. He channeled the fury of Seth. Pharaohs like Seti III, whose name literally means man of Seth, and Ramesses the Great revered Seth as a primary patron of war. They depicted him on their chariot, teaching them to use the bow, confusing the enemies of Egypt with his chaotic power. He was the one who could sow terror in the hearts of the chaotic foreigners, the Hittites, the Libyans. Once again, he was the chaotic force they used to protect their borders from other chaos. So now we have a complete picture of this god. He is a divine contradiction. In the sky, he is the heroic champion of Ra, the guardian of Maat. On earth, he is the god of the terrifying desert, the raging storm, the infertile land, and the violent foreigner. He is the ultimate protector and the ultimate disruptor. He is a soldier. And what happens to a soldier in peacetime? His jealousy, his resentment of Osiris was not just petty sibling rivalry. It was a fundamental earthly chaos, a personal isfet brewing within the system. As Osiris's rule brought unprecedented peace and prosperity, Seth's role on earth became less relevant, obsolete even. He was the god of violence in a world that had achieved peace. He was the god of the desert in a world that only celebrated the farmland. Osiris's perfect order wasn't just ignoring Seth, it was erasing his necessity. And as Seth's resentment festered, as this imbalance in their relationship and their destinies grew, the stage was set for the unthinkable. This simmering discontent, this growing darkness, was the inevitable precursor to a larger, more profound disorder. But there was one more piece to the puzzle, one final, deeply personal betrayal that would light the fuse. This is a story that doesn't always make it into the mainstream myths, but it is recorded by later writers like Plutarch and hinted at in various texts. It concerns Seth's wife, his sister, Nephthys. Nephthys was a goddess of the night, of darkness, of mourning, and of hidden liminal spaces. She was, in many ways, a perfect match for the god of the other. But their union had one glaring problem. It was barren. Think of the symbolism. Seth, the god of the sterile desert, could not create life. His own marriage was as infertile as his kingdom. Meanwhile, his brother Osiris, the god of fertility, was almost too fertile. The land bloomed at his touch. Life sprang up everywhere he walked. According to the story, Nephthys, his own wife, desperately wanted a child, and she knew her husband, the god of sterility, could not give her one. So she devised a plan. One night, she disguised herself, using her magic to take on the appearance of her beautiful, fertile sister, Isis. She slipped into Osiris's bed, and he, either mistaking her for his own wife or perhaps knowingly, slept with her. From this illicit, adulterous union, a child was conceived. That child was Anubis, the jackal-headed god. When Nephthys realized she was pregnant, she was terrified of what Seth would do in his rage. She abandoned the infant Anubis in the papyrus marshes, where he was later found and adopted by, of all people, Isis, who raised him as her own. We don't know exactly when or how Seth found out, but he did. And you have to imagine what this did to him. This was the final devastating blow. This wasn't cosmic. This wasn't political. This was a profound personal and sexual humiliation. His brother, the golden boy, had everything: the kingdom, the adoration of the world, a fertile marriage, a perfect wife. And now he had, in Seth's eyes, taken the one thing that was Seth's, his own wife's fidelity, and had succeeded where Seth had failed, fathering a child. It confirmed all of Seth's darkest insecurities: that he was weak, that he was undesirable, that he was sterile, that he was in every conceivable way secondary to his brother. This simmering discontent, this cosmic imbalance, had now found its flashpoint. The rage of the storm god, the violence of the warrior, the jealousy of the marginalized brother, and the fury of a cuckolded husband all coalesced into a single, white-hot, focused point of murderous intent. The perfect, serene, golden age of Osiris was built on a lie. It was built on a hidden adultery, and it was built on the marginalization of a necessary divine force. The system was rotten. It was imbalanced. It was, in Seth's eyes, a monument to a hypocritical, complacent Ma'at that had to be torn down. His simmering discontent, this growing darkness, was no longer just a mood. It was a plan. It was the inevitable precursor to a larger, more profound disorder, a disorder that, paradoxically, was the only thing that could force the cosmos into a new, more complex, and ultimately more complete state of being. The renewal was coming, but first there had to be death. Seth put his plan into motion. He invited Osiris to a lavish banquet, tricked the trusting king into a magnificent coffin, and sealed it shut, casting him into the Nile. But murder wasn't enough. To ensure Osiris could never return, Seth hunted down his brother's body, tore it into 14 pieces, and scattered them across the land. The golden age was over. Chaos had claimed the throne. The stage was now set for the greatest confrontation in Egyptian mythology. On one side, the reigning king, Seth, the god of chaos, brute strength, and the undisputed tyrannical master of the known world. On the other, a figure emerging from the shadows of the papyrus swamps, Horus, the son of Osiris. He was no longer a helpless infant, hidden by his mother's magic. He had come of age, tempered by a childhood of constant danger, his heart filled with a single divine purpose. He was the Netzai-Tef, the avenger of his father. He was the rightful heir, the living embodiment of Ma'at return, and he had come to claim his birthright. But this was not going to be a simple, glorious war of good versus evil. This was a family feud, a cosmic legal battle, a messy, bitter, and protracted conflict that would drag on for 80 long years. This was the contendings of Horus and Seth. It all began when Horus, now a grown god, strong and cunning, traveled to the divine tribunal of the gods, the great Ennead of Heliopolis, and formally issued his challenge. "The throne of my father Osiris was stolen," he declared. "I am his son. It belongs to me." The gods were immediately and hopelessly divided. The case was brought before the great god Ra, creator of all, who presided as the chief judge. And from the very beginning, Ra had a clear favorite. He favored Seth. This seems shocking, doesn't it? Why would the ultimate god of order and light favor the god of chaos? But Ra's reasoning was, from his perspective, pragmatic. He would look at Seth and say, he is older, he is stronger, he is experienced. And most importantly, Ra would think, every single night, this boy Horus sleeps, while Seth is the one at the prow of my barge, protecting me from Apep. He is useful. He is a proven warrior. This Horus is just a child, a boy still stinking of mother's milk. He is not fit to rule. This set the stage for a political stalemate. On one side, Ra and his supporters argued for Seth's strength and experience. On the other, Thoth, the god of wisdom, and most of the other gods argued for Horus's legitimacy. The throne belongs to the son, not the brother, Thoth insisted. This is the law. This is Ma'at. And then there was Isis. Isis was not just a spectator. She was her son's chief advocate, his lawyer, and his greatest strategist. She was a tireless, brilliant, and utterly relentless force. When the tribunal dithered, she was the one who forced the issue. She wrote a desperate, threatening letter to the ancient wise goddess Neith. Neith, outraged at the injustice, sent a terrifying reply to the Ennead. "If you do not give the throne to Horus," she warned, "I will become so angry that I will make the sky itself collapse and fall to the earth." Faced with this cosmic blackmail, the gods were forced to take the case seriously. But Seth was not without his own cunning. He knew Isis was his greatest opponent, not her boy. So he made a demand. "I will not continue this tribunal if she is present," he declared. "Let us move this court to a remote sacred island, and you must command the ferryman Anti to forbid any boat from carrying a woman who looks like Isis." The gods, weary of the fighting, agreed. This was Seth's first critical mistake. He underestimated his sister's magic and her rage. Isis arrived at the riverbank and found the ferryman, Anti, who dutifully refused her passage. So Isis transformed. She shifted her form into that of a bent, old, humble woman, her face a mask of wrinkles, a heavy cloak covering her divine form. She hobbled up to Anti and offered him a single precious gold ring. "Just to the other side, good man," she whispered. "My stores of food are on that island." Anti, seeing only a gold ring and a harmless old woman, took the bribe and ferried her across. Once on the island where Seth and the gods were reconvening, Isis transformed again, but she didn't reveal herself. Instead, she used her magic to become the single most beautiful woman Seth had ever seen. She was young, heartbreakingly lovely, and she had the look of a high-born widow, her face streaked with tears. She sat down on a rock by the path where she knew Seth would walk. Sure enough, Seth, the god of unbridled appetite, saw her. He was instantly captivated. He approached her, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "My dear, beautiful creature," he said, "why do you weep?" Isis, peering up at him through tears, wove her trap. "Oh, my lord," she cried, "a terrible thing has happened. I was the wife of a simple herdsman. We had a beautiful son. But my husband died, and now a wicked stranger has come. He has beaten me. He is trying to steal all of our cattle, and he says he will throw my own son out of his home and take his inheritance for himself. My lord, you are so strong, so just. Will you not protect me and my son from this evil man?" Seth's chest swelled with indignation. He was, after all, a god of strength, and this was a clear-cut case of injustice. But more than that, his ego was stroked. This beautiful, vulnerable creature was looking to him as her protector. He fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. "This is an outrage," Seth bellowed, his voice the thunder in the sky. "How can this be? This wicked stranger should be beaten. How dare he try to steal the cattle while the son of the man still lives? As I live, I will use my strength to destroy this criminal, and I will see to it that your son receives his rightful inheritance." In that instant, the air crackled. The beautiful woman vanished, and in her place stood Isis, her true divine form, blazing with cold, triumphant fury. The other gods, who had been listening, gathered around. "Seth!" Isis cried out, her voice echoing across the island. "You have judged yourself. With your own mouth you have spoken the law. With your own words you have damned your own case." Seth was speechless, trapped in a cage of his own making. He had just argued with all his divine authority that a son's inheritance is sacred and must be protected. The gods erupted. The case was, for a moment, decided. Horus's claim was validated by Seth himself. Ra, furious at being tricked, punished the ferryman Anti by having his toes cut off. But the damage was done. Seth, humiliated and outmaneuvered, his legal arguments in tatters, resorted to the one thing he had left: pure, brute force. "Enough of these tricks," he roared at Horus. "If you want the throne, you will prove your strength against mine." He issued a challenge, one that played to his own nature. "We will both transform ourselves into hippopotami. We will submerge ourselves in the Nile, and the first one to surface in 3 months' time is the loser and forfeits the throne." Horus, bound by honor, had to accept. The two gods plunged into the Nile, their massive, chaotic forms sending waves crashing over the banks. Isis, watching from the shore, was overcome with terror. She knew Seth. She knew his capacity for violence. This wasn't a fair contest. It was an execution. She could not let her son, the only thing she had left of Osiris, die. She ran to her forge and created a divine harpoon of copper with a rope attached. She threw it, aiming for Seth's hippo form, but in her panic she missed. The harpoon struck the back of her own son, Horus. He roared in pain. "Mother, what are you doing?" Isis, horrified, used her magic to instantly recall the harpoon. She threw it again. This time it struck true, embedding itself deep in the massive flank of Seth. Seth surfaced, roaring in a pain and fury that shook the very foundations of the river. But his cry was not just rage, it was anguish. "What have I done to you, my sister?" he bellowed at Isis. "Why do you attack me? Am I not your brother?" And in that moment, Isis faltered. This was her brother, the brother she had grown up with, the brother who, despite everything, was still part of her. Her heart softened, and her magic wavered. She released the harpoon. Seth, wounded but free, escaped. Horus, surfacing at that very moment, saw it all. He saw his mother free, his father's murderer. He was overcome by a blind, primal rage, a rage that was perhaps more Seth-like than he would ever care to admit. He felt betrayed by the one person he trusted. He bounded from the river, his eyes red with fury, and he stalked towards his mother. And in a shocking, brutal act that blurred the lines between Maat and Isfet, Horus, the god of order, raised his own blade and cut off his mother's head. He grabbed the head and fled into the mountains, leaving his mother's body behind, a fugitive from both Seth and the gods. It was Thoth, the god of wisdom, who found her. He used his immense healing magic and, in a moment of divine strangeness, replaced her head with that of a cow, linking her forever with the great cow goddess Hathor. But the damage to Horus's reputation was done. This act gave Seth a new opening. "You see," he argued to the gods, "he is unfit. He is a hormonal, violent boy who just mutilated his own mother. This is not a king. This is a monster. The gods once again were divided. The conflict had reached its darkest, messiest point. And this is when Seth decided to end it, not with law, not with a fair fight, but with an act of ultimate defilement. He approached Horus, feigning a truce. "This fighting has gone on too long, nephew," he said, his voice laced with a false sincerity. "Let us have peace. Come, spend a day at my palace. Let us eat and drink as family." Horus, perhaps chastened by his own terrible crime, or perhaps just exhausted, warily agreed. That night, as Horus slept, Seth crept into his room. He lay down beside his nephew, and in an act of profound, calculated violation, Seth sexually assaulted him. In the Egyptian mind, this was not just a physical act, it was a magical and political one. It was an act of dominance. By feminizing Horus, by treating him as a female, Seth was proving his own male superiority. He was disqualifying Horus from the throne, which could only be held by a whole and dominant male. In Seth's mind, the contest was now over. He had won, but Horus had not been sleeping. He had been warned by his mother Isis, or perhaps he had anticipated the attack. As Seth assaulted him, Horus did not fight back. He reached down and with a silent iron will, he caught Seth's semen in his hand. He waited until Seth was asleep, then slipped out of the palace, his hand clutched tight. He ran, not to the gods, but to his mother. He showed her what had happened. Isis did not panic. She acted. Her rage was now a cold, surgical instrument. First, she took a knife, and in an act of agonizing purification, she cut off Horus's polluted hand and threw it into the marshes. She then used her magic to instantly grow him a new one. Now for the counterstroke. "We will not just defend," she told her son, "we will attack." She magically drew Horus's own semen from his body. And then she went to Seth's garden. She knew her brother's one great weakness. For some strange symbolic reason, Seth loved wild lettuce. Its milky white sap was seen as an aphrodisiac, a symbol of fertility that the sterile god craved. Isis, with a terrible secret smile, took her son's seed and carefully, artfully, spread it all over the lettuce. That evening, Seth, feeling smug and victorious, walked in his garden. He saw the beautiful, crisp lettuce, and he devoured it. He had, in effect, consumed the seed of Horus. He had been magically, secretly impregnated by the very boy he thought he had dominated. The next morning, the gods convened. Seth strode to the center of the tribunal, his chest puffed with arrogance. "The case is closed," he announced. "Horus is unfit to rule, or say, last night I did to him what a male does to a female. He has been dominated. He is no king." The gods were horrified, and Horus, for his part, looked ashamed. But before the gods could rule, Thoth, the wise, stepped forward. "Let us see the evidence," he said, his voice calm. "Let the divine seed be called, and let us see where it lies." He turned to Seth's seed. "O semen of Seth, come forth that we may see you." And from the middle of the tribunal hall, a small, weak voice called out. From the bottom of the papyrus marsh, where Isis had thrown the severed hand, Horus was cleared. Then Thoth turned to Horus's seed. "O semen of Horus, come forth that we may see you." Seth laughed until he choked. He doubled over, his hand clutching his stomach. He felt something moving, something emerging. He cried out in pain and confusion, and to the utter horror and amazement of the entire pantheon, a shining golden disk, some say the sun, some say the moon, burst forth from Seth's own forehead. The humiliation was absolute. It was total. Seth, the hypermasculine god of violence, the ultimate symbol of male dominance, had been magically impregnated by his nephew. His entire claim of superiority was not just negated, it was inverted. He was the one who had been feminized. He was the one who was unfit. He fled in shame, his roars of fury echoing across the heavens. The scales had tipped permanently, but Ra, stubborn as ever, still hesitated. He has been shamed, he grumbled, but is he strong? Is he a leader? So one final test was proposed, this time by Horus, a boat race. But, Seth declared, trying to regain his footing, to prove our strength, the boats must be made of stone. Seth, ever the literalist, ever the believer in brute force, went to the top of a mountain. He spent days carving a massive, beautiful boat from a single peak of granite. With his colossal strength, he hauled it to the Nile and set it in the water. It sank like, well, a boat made of stone. Horus, on the other hand, had his mother's cunning. He went to the forest, cut down pine trees, and built a sleek, fast, and perfectly normal wooden boat. Then he did something brilliant. He covered the entire boat in a thick layer in plaster and painted it to look exactly like polished gray granite. The race began. The gods lined the banks. Horus's stone boat shot forward, gliding easily on the current. Seth, furious, could only watch from the shore, his own boat at the bottom of the Nile. Enraged, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He transformed. He became a great red hippopotamus and plunged into the water, intent on ramming Horus's boat and sinking him. But as his great jaws lunged, his teeth didn't hit stone, they hit wood. He had been tricked. Again. The gods on the shore saw it all. They saw Seth, the cheater, the poor loser, and they saw Horus, the intelligent, cunning, and rightful leader. The contendings were over. The case was closed. The gods, led by Thoth, and with the final grudging consent of Ra, sided with Horus. The 80-year-long, brutal, and bizarre dispute had finally come to an end. Horus was crowned the undisputed king of Egypt. Maat was restored. The sky did not fall. The land of the living finally had its rightful just ruler. From that day forward, every pharaoh who ever sat on the throne of Egypt was not just a king, he was the living Horus, the embodiment of that restored, triumphant, and hard-won order. Osiris, from his throne in the underworld, was finally avenged. He would rule the dead and his son would rule the living. The cosmic balance was restored. But what of Seth? This is perhaps the most important part of the entire story. Seth was defeated. He was shamed. He was beaten. But he was not destroyed. He was not killed. He was not imprisoned in some dark cosmic pit like the Greek Titans. The gods, in their infinite wisdom, knew that you cannot destroy chaos. It can only be contained and integrated. So Seth was given his sentence. He was formally banished from the fertile lands of Egypt. He could never rule the civilized world again. He was exiled permanently to his natural domain, the vast barren deserts. The marginalization he had always feared was now his eternal legal reality. However, he was also integrated. Ra, who now had a newfound respect for Horus's cunning, also reaffirmed Seth's indispensable strength. He formally assigned Seth for all eternity to his original heroic post. He would stand at the prow of the solar barge. His rage, his violence, his chaotic nature was not eliminated. It was channeled. It was given a divine purpose. His job was to protect Maat from the greater world-ending chaos of Apep. His rebellious voice became the thunder in the sky, a constant rumbling reminder of his power, but a power that now served, rather than subverted, the cosmic order. For a long time, this was how Seth was understood. He was the loyal opposition, the necessary disruptor, the revered god of warriors and pharaohs. Great kings like Seti I and Rameses the Great proudly bore his name, hailing him as a patron of their military might. But history, as it often does, had one final cruel trick to play on the god of chaos. In the Second Intermediate Period, Egypt was invaded. A group of foreign rulers, Asiatics from the east known as the Hyksos, conquered Lower Egypt. They ruled for over a century. And which Egyptian god did these feared and hated foreigners choose to elevate as their chief deity? Seth, of course. He was, after all, the traditional god of foreigners. When the native Egyptian pharaohs of Thebes finally rose up, expelled the Hyksos, and reunified their country, they began a massive, systematic propaganda campaign. Seth, the god of their hated oppressors, became the ultimate symbol of treason. He was no longer the misunderstood balancer. He was the enemy within. He became the god of all things evil, a figure of pure, demonic malevolence. His statues were smashed. His name was hacked out of monuments. His tragedy was now complete. He was fully and finally vilified, not just by myth, but by real-world human politics. He had become the ultimate scapegoat for all of Egypt's chaos, both divine and historical. So, the war is over. Horus has the throne, Osiris is avenged, and Seth is defeated, banished, and yet given one of the most important jobs in the cosmos. His story ends in this strange, contradictory state of being a vilified exile and a necessary protector. And if this were just a simple action movie, the credits would roll right here. But the ancient Egyptians weren't just telling a good story, they were explaining the very nature of reality. Why did Seth, the villain, get to live? Why wasn't he destroyed? What does it all mean? To answer that, we have to move past the what and how and dive deep into the why. We need to unpack the profound philosophy behind this myth, because it's a lesson that is just as relevant today as it was 5,000 years ago. So what do we do with a story like that? We've just been through an epic 80-year saga of family betrayal, divine magic, brutal murder, political maneuvering, and a series of contests so bizarre they defy modern imagination. We've seen a god-crowned king and another god banished to the desert. We've seen order, Mayat, triumph. But if we just close the book there, if we just say, and Horus won, and Seth lost, the end, we've missed the entire point. We've missed the profound, challenging, and deeply human philosophy that the ancient Egyptians were exploring through this myth. The story of Seth isn't just a story. It's a philosophical treatise. It's a grand, complex, and often uncomfortable answer to the biggest questions of all. Why is there suffering? Why do bad things happen? Why is the world so often violent, unpredictable, and unfair? And the Egyptian answer, embodied in Seth, is perhaps the most fascinating of all. Without chaos, order cannot exist. This wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was the central governing principle of their entire cosmos. And to understand it, we have to stop thinking like modern Westerners with our neat boxes of good and evil, hero and villain. We have to think like an ancient Egyptian, living on a razor's edge, a thin 5-mile-wide strip of fertile paradise, surrounded on all sides by 1,000 miles of a terrifying, sterile, and lifeless hell. That was their world, Kemet and Deshret, the black land and the red land, order and chaos. They didn't just know about this duality, they lived it every single day. So let's break down what Seth, in his final integrated form, truly represents. First, let's look at his domains again, not as a laundry list of bad things, but as metaphors for this profound, necessary chaos. He is most famously the god of Isfet, or disorder. As we've discussed, this isn't evil, it's the absence of Mayat. It is the universe's natural tendency to slide back into the undifferentiated soup from which it was born. Ma'at is the effort of creation. It's the act of building the house, of planting the crops, of raising the child, of following the law. Isfet is the entropy. It's the storm that flattens the house, the blight that kills the crops, the sickness that fells the child, the crime that shatters the law. The Egyptians were realists. They knew that Ma'at wasn't a given. It wasn't a permanent victory. It was a daily struggle. And Seth was the face of that struggle. He was the divine stress test. He was the grit in the oyster, the necessary irritant that forces the pearl to be created. Without Seth, without the threat of Isfet, Ma'at becomes lazy. It becomes stagnant. It becomes the complacent golden age of Osiris, an age so placid and unsuspecting that it can be toppled by a single simple trick. Seth's function is to keep Ma'at sharp, to keep it resilient, to force it to adapt, to evolve, and to be vigilant. He is the cosmic opposition, and a government with no opposition is a tyranny, even if it's a benevolent one. Seth, by his very existence, ensures that order must constantly prove itself, must earn its right to exist day after day. His domains are metaphors for this necessary duality. The desert was not just a sterile, chaotic wasteland. It was the natural fortress that protected Egypt. It was also the chaotic place they had to brave to find the golden gems needed for their ordered civilization. His storms and violence were not just destruction. They were the raw, focused power needed to defend the sun god from Apep. This is his tragedy of misunderstanding in its purest form. He is the necessary violence that a state must wield to protect itself. As we saw on the solar barge of Ra, when the ultimate is fed, the world-ending serpent Apep attacks. What good is Osiris's benevolence? What good is Isis's magic? What good is Thoth's wisdom? You cannot negotiate with the abyss. You cannot civilize oblivion. You must fight it. You must meet its raw, chaotic violence with a greater, more focused, more violent violence. And Seth is the only one strong enough, the only one chaotic enough to do it. This is his tragedy of misunderstanding in its purest form. He is the king's fury. He is the necessary violence that a state must be able to wield to protect itself. He is the soldier on the wall, the executioner, the bouncer at the club of creation. His hands are bloody, and his reputation is terrible so that the rest of the pantheon and the people of Egypt can live in peace. He does the dirty work of Ma'at. He is the chaotic force used to fight chaos. His tragedy is that the very people he protects will look at his bloody hands and call him a monster, failing to see that the blood he spills is the blood of the greater monster that would have devoured them all. This duality completely reframes the Osiris story. Yes, Seth is the betrayer. Yes, he is the murderer. But look at what his evil acts accomplished. By murdering Osiris, he committed the first and therefore necessary murder. And in doing so, he set in motion a chain of events that created the entire Egyptian concept of the afterlife. Osiris's tragic death and dismemberment wasn't an end. It was a transformation. It was the event that forced him to become the king of the underworld. Without Seth's act of chaos, there is no Lord of the Dead. There is no final judgment. There is no path for mortal souls to achieve eternal life. Seth, in his murderous rage, inadvertently created heaven. By scattering Osiris's body into 14 pieces across Egypt, he wasn't just desecrating a corpse. He was unintentionally founding the entire religious geography of the nation. The quest of Isis and Nephthys to find the pieces established the great temple sites of Egypt. Each city that claimed a relic, an arm in one, a leg in another, became a sacred center. Seth's act of division ironically unified the two lands, giving every nome or province a direct physical stake in the body of the god-king. He created a national identity built from a fragmented corpse. And finally, there's the 80-year contendings. This wasn't just a period of chaotic brawling. It was a forge. Horus at the beginning was just a boy. He had the right to the throne, but did he have the might? Did he have the cunning? Seth was the anvil against which the new king was hammered. To defeat his uncle, Horus couldn't just be good. He had to be smart. He had to learn cunning from his mother, Isis. He had to learn strategy. He had to learn resilience, and he had to earn his crown. Seth's relentless, brutal, and unfair challenge was the final necessary exam that transformed a rightful heir into a worthy king. This is the ultimate lesson of the motif. Seth's Isfet did not destroy Ma'at. It refined it. It deepened it. It forced order to evolve from the simple, placid, naive state of Osiris's reign into the complex, resilient, and eternal cycle that would define Egypt. Horus, the living king, on the throne, and Osiris, the avenged king, in the underworld. It created a system that had a place for life and death, order and chaos, justice on earth and justice in the afterlife. This profound understanding is even baked into his very image, that bizarre, unidentifiable Seth animal. As we discussed, its power is in its ambiguity. It's a hybrid. It's a composite. It's a creature that defies categorization. It's not a dog. It's not a donkey. It's not a pig. It's other. It is the visual representation of his function. His job is to challenge your neat, comfortable categories. His job is to force you to confront the unknown, the unfamiliar, the foreign. By being something you cannot label, he forces you to think, to adapt, and to be resilient. He is the ultimate unknown at the edge of the map, and your civilization is defined by how you choose to deal with him. This idea, this profound, complex dance of duality, is one of Egypt's greatest gifts to human philosophy, and its echoes are everywhere. It's impossible to look at Seth's relationship with Horus or Isfet's relationship with Ma'at and not see the seeds of later philosophies. The most obvious, of course, is the Taoist concept of yin and yang, two seemingly opposing forces, light and dark, male and female, active and passive, that are not, in fact, at war. They are two halves of a whole, coiled together, each containing the seed of the other. They are locked in a dynamic, eternal, and necessary balance. One cannot exist without the other. That is precisely the Egyptian worldview. And we see this archetype, the chaotic anti-hero, everywhere in our modern storytelling, which shows just how deeply this idea resonates with us. The most perfect modern parallel? It has to be Loki from the Marvel Universe. Think about it. He is the ultimate outsider, the adopted brother, the god of mischief and lies. He is defined by his jealousy of the golden boy brother, Thor, the god of thunder and heir to the throne. His actions in the first Avengers film are pure Seth. Driven by envy, he allies with a foreign power. He tries to usurp the throne. He sows chaos and violence, and he murders a beloved unifying figure. He is the villain. But as his story evolves, what happens? He becomes the misunderstood balancer. His chaos, his unpredictability, his morally gray nature becomes the only thing that can solve problems that order cannot. He is the trickster, the shapeshifter, the one who can navigate the dark, ambiguous places. And in the end, in Infinity War and his own series, his role is not to destroy the universe, but to protect it from a greater, more absolute chaos. He is the god of Isfet, who, in his own twisted way, is essential for maintaining the sacred timeline. He is 100% Seth repackaged for a modern audience. But the echoes don't stop there. You see it clearly in the works of authors like Neil Gaiman. His American Gods is a world built on this principle, a world of morally gray deities where the good and bad are hopelessly and beautifully intertwined. You see it in the ultimate chaotic force in comics, the Joker, whose entire philosophical purpose, in his own words, is to be the Eisvet to Batman's Ma'at. I am the Ka to your Ba, he might as well say. I am the necessary disruptor that gives your crusade for order meaning. You even see it in the golden age of prestige television. What are anti-heroes like Walter White from Breaking Bad or Tony Soprano? They are agents of chaos inserted into an orderly world. Suburbia, the family unit, the American dream. And their Eisvet, their violence, their lies, their crimes, is the engine that drives the entire narrative. It's the force that challenges the norms of their world, that exposes its hypocrisy, and that ultimately forces a kind of terrible, bloody renewal. All of these stories, all of these complex modern anti-heroes, are borrowing a page from a script written 5,000 years ago in the sands of Egypt. They are all children of Seth. We've been on a huge journey. We've gone from myth to metaphor, from the ancient Nile Valley to the Avengers. We've broken down how Seth isn't just a god, but a concept, the necessary disruption, the tragic outsider, the grit in the oyster. We've seen how this ancient idea of a necessary chaos is one of the most sophisticated and enduring philosophies in human history. So, what do we take away from all this? We've heard the story, we've analyzed the themes. Now let's put it all together. What is the final human lesson that this complex, terrifying, and profound God of the storm has to teach us about our own lives right here, right now? And there was Seth. His transformation was complete. His statues were smashed. His name was hacked from the stone of temples. His integration was forgotten, and his demonization began. He was no longer a complex, necessary part of the cosmos. He was just the devil. This perhaps was his ultimate tragedy, not his defeat by Horus, not his humiliation by Isis, but his final complete misunderstanding by the very mortals he, in his own paradoxical way, had always protected. So we are left with the great enduring legacy. What is the lesson of Seth? What is the timeless wisdom of that powerful, challenging motif? Without chaos, order cannot exist. It's a lesson that I think is more relevant today than it has ever been. We live in a world that is obsessed with order. We crave stability. We build systems of perfect control. We algorithmically curate our lives to avoid all friction, all discomfort, all otherness. We build our own personal golden ages of Osiris, and we plug our ears, desperately trying to ignore the chaotic, howling wind just outside the garden walls. Seth is the God who tells us this is a fool's errand. His first and most powerful lesson is that true strength is resilience, not perfection. The perfect order of Osiris's first reign was a glass house, beautiful, placid, and utterly fragile. It shattered at the first touch of a real crisis. Ma'at is not a static state of being. It is a verb. It is an active daily process of confronting Isfet and winning. Seth is the crisis. He is the unexpected diagnosis. He is the sudden, brutal layoff. He is the global pandemic that shuts down the world. He is the personal failure that brings you to your knees. He is the force that shatters your comfortable, placid, naive order. And his purpose in that moment is not just to destroy, it is to test. It is to forge. It is to ask you, is your order strong enough? Are you strong enough? He is the divine fire that burns away the dead wood and forces new, stronger, and more resilient growth to emerge from the ashes. He teaches us that a life without challenge, a life without Isfet, is a life that has never truly been tested, and has never truly become strong. His second lesson is the one that speaks most to our fractured, divided modern world, the tragedy of the other. Seth's entire story is a story of marginalization. He is the outsider, the god of the vile foreigner, the lord of the useless desert. His entire identity is defined by what he is not. And the myth shows us, in stark, dramatic terms, what happens when a society or a family or a pantheon takes a necessary, vital part of itself, pushes it to the fringes, devalues it, humiliates it, and tells it that it does not matter. That chaos, that is-fet, doesn't just disappear. It doesn't go away. It festers. It curdles. It turns from a generalized cosmic force into a personal, focused, and murderous rage. Seth's murder of Osiris is, at his heart, a violent, desperate scream of, "I exist, I matter," from a being that has been told, in every possible way, that he does not. Seth's story is a profound, timeless, and frankly terrifying warning about the dangers of demonizing what we don't understand, of exiling the other to the desert. It teaches us that a true, healthy, and resilient Mayat doesn't exile its chaotic elements. It finds a way to include them, to give them a voice, to give them a purpose. And that right there is his final and most profound lesson. The goal is integration, not annihilation. This is the ultimate wisdom of the Egyptian gods. They did not kill Seth, they channeled him. We all have a Seth within us. We all have that inner chaos. We all have the red land inside. Our anger, our envy, our insecurities, our raw, untamed ambitions, our capacity for violence. And our modern civilized world often tells us to kill it, to repress it, to medicate it, to exorcise it, to pretend it doesn't exist, to be nothing but the placid, good, orderly Osiris. The Egyptians knew better. They knew that is-fet is a part of Sekhum. It is a part of our power. That rage, that chaos is a fire. If you let it run rampant in your house, it will burn your life to the ground, just as Seth's tyranny burned Egypt. But if you can harness that fire, if you can channel it, if you can take it out of the palace and put it on the prow of your boat, it becomes the very thing that protects you. It becomes the passion that drives you to fight injustice. It becomes the ferocity that you use to protect your family. It becomes the restless, boundless energy that you use to create art, to build a company, to change the world. In the end, Seth is not a monster. He is not a villain. He is perhaps the most human and the most relatable of all the gods. He is not an ideal like Horus. He is not a serene, perfected martyr like Osiris. He is a divine, walking, raging flaw. He is jealousy. He is insecurity. He is the fury born of humiliation. He is the messy, contradictory, uncomfortable, and necessary reality of the human experience. He is, in the end, a profound teacher. He teaches us that true harmony is not the absence of chaos, but the brave, dynamic, and ever-shifting balance between the two. He teaches us that our greatest growth will never, ever come from our comfortable, fertile valley. It will always come from our time in the desert. So the next time life feels chaotic, when the sandstorm is at your door and the sky is turning red and your own carefully built order feels like it's shattering, remember Seth. Remember the God of chaos. And instead of just cursing the storm, maybe ask yourself, with a little bit of that divine Egyptian wisdom, what is this force here to teach me? What greater chaos is it protecting me from? What part of my life has become too stagnant, too placid, too Osiris? And what new, stronger, and more resilient part of me is it trying to forge